Hi there, I'm Danny Flexen. Welcome to the latest edition of SecondsOut ReFLEXions. We're here every Monday at 4:30 PM to talk about the boxing action of the weekend just gone. And we had three fairly major shows over the weekend, two in the US and one here in the UK. And I've already covered the main event of the UK show, Alexander Usyk against Derek Chisora, at length in my post-fight review, which is available on the channel right now. So I'm going to use this opportunity to concentrate a bit more on the US shows and the Usyk-Chisora undercard. And no better place to start with the man you'll be looking at in your thumbnail picture, scoring what many people have tagged as the knockout of the year. I mean, it's early November, so there's only, 6-7 weeks left for someone to beat it. And that's Gervonta Davis, who had, for many people, myself included, a tougher than expected fight with Leo Santa Cruz, who was... best days probably at featherweight, was challenging Gervonta Davis at super feather, and Davis is big for 130 pounds, has often struggled with the weight. There's been talk of him moving up sooner rather than later to lightweight, and obviously there was a lightweight belt on the line as well in their fight. Gave him a tougher than expected tussle, but eventually succumbed to that massive right uppercut, which you can see in the picture, and which, many people called him knockout of the year. He put something up, Davis, today or yesterday, saying about his adjustment in the first right hand that Santa Cruz threw when he was backed up to the ropes caught Davis. The second one was blocked with a higher guard, and the third one he slipped and then landed that uppercut through the middle, and it was indeed a monster shot. The only thing I would say is that you have to look at Santa Cruz there throwing three lead straight right hands in a row, which he wouldn't normally do. He was obviously trying his hardest to fend Davis off with his back to the ropes. And no trainer would ever recommend you do that. Like, throwing lead right hands is a risk in itself, without setting out with the jab or whatever. But throwing three in a row, you kind of chancing your arm a bit, to coin a phrase, because the first one landed great. The second one, I can see why you'd get greedy, but the second one was blocked, and that should have been the warning sign. And then obviously Davis, smart fighter, had seen the plan and knew what to do to counter it effectively, and it was a devastating shot, there's no doubt about it. Timing, power, speed, accuracy, it had the lot. And for me, it does trump Alexander Povetkin's uppercut knockout of Dillian Whyte, but as I said, there's still 7 or 8 weeks to go until the end of the year for someone to trump that. Good performance overall from Davis. Pay-per-view main event, there's probably a lot of pressure on his shoulders. I really like the tweet he sent out to Leo Santa Cruz, saying he hopes he's okay, he hopes his dad's okay. It was an honour to share the ring with a warrior. I'm paraphrasing a little, but that's pretty much what he said, and I thought that was a very classy touch. And it was a good fight, entertaining. But what next for Davis? I mean, Leo Santa Cruz could have another run down at 126. Still looks like he's got plenty to offer in his more natural weight class. As for Davis, I'd like to see him stay at 130 and fight some of the top names there, particularly Miguel Berchelt, who I think's a very, very underrated fighter. He could perhaps be in the top 10 pound for pound for a lot of people, perhaps should be. Never seems to get talked about enough. Has that WBC belt. Intelligent pressure, very powerful, underrated boxing IQ. I'd really like to see that match up against Davis. It's whether Davis can still, and I think it could be this generation, I've said this before, Floyd Mayweather, Diego Corrales, although not necessarily with the same dominant outcome in the ring. But similar kind of mesh of styles, both guys seemingly around their peak as well at the moment, in terms of their form and physically. Berchelt, I think, is only like 27 or 28, although I think people get the impression he's older because he's, got this reputation as a war-torn Mexican, but he is a very, very good fighter, and I think that'd be an excellent fight to decide overall supremacy at 130 pounds. However, if Davis can no longer safely and effectively make 130, we know he did it in the most recent fight, but if he feels like some of his strength was sapped out of him by doing so in this one, he wants to move up to 130. There's a huge number of attractive fights there, most notably probably Ryan Garcia. He's not a champion at the moment. He's not but he is one of the top names there, and there's been beef, social media beef between the two of them before, so it's an easy fight to sell. You've got the, golden boy prospect, Oscar De La Hoya, protege, although in recent times they've been more at odds, against the Floyd Mayweather protege in Gervonta Davis, Mayweather Promotions. It sells itself. Both got big social media followings, both very high profile fighters, and they can both actually fight as well. Davis is a confident, punch-picking, lot of pressure with his feet. Doesn't always throw loads and loads of shots, but what he does throw tends to be pretty devastating. He's got that low centre of gravity. You've got Ryan Garcia, who's actually quite rangy. He's got that long left hook that's proven really potent so far. And yeah, it's a mouth-watering fight. Obviously, Garcia's still got a very, very difficult fight against Luke Campbell next time out, and there's no guarantee he gets through that with the win anyway. But if he does, him against Davis seems like a natural to make if Davis makes the decision to move permanently to 130 pounds. We also saw another great performance on US soil, this one by Naoya Inoue, the monster. Few questions were raised about him, of course, after the WBSS final against Nonito Donaire, where Donaire, very good fighter in his own right, proved that Inoue is actually immortal after all, despite the monster moniker and the great run of form that had seen him dispatch people on his way to world titles at 3 separate divisions. But Inoue, I don't even want to say back to his best because I thought he was very, very good against Donaire. I thought he just came up against a really good opponent on form that night. But certainly put in a spectacular performance, dominant against the brave and dogged Jason Moloney, who just didn't have the firepower to compete with Inoue on equal terms, and took him out with a lovely short right hand towards the end of the fight. It was the end of the fight, obviously, but after the middle rounds. Looked good doing so, and now for him, he's looking at potentially unifying against someone like John Riel Casimero, a fight that was set for earlier this year and was postponed and then ultimately cancelled. Or maybe one of the other rival bantamweight champions. I don't think Inoue should go any further up in weight. I think he's kind of reached his ceiling there. But at bantamweight, he still looks pretty devastating. And it's going to take, again, another guy who's still kind of young at his physical peak. It's going to take someone very special to beat him. So they were the fights overseas. And then we'll quickly delve into the Usyk Chisora undercard because I didn't really get much chance to talk about that the other night when I did my post-fight review. It was past midnight and I was quite keen to get to my bed, unsurprisingly. But it was quite a good undercard. I found the Lee Selby, George Kambosos IBF lightweight final eliminator quite a watchable fight. Kambosos certainly deserved the victory. His slipping of Selby's shots was good and he was quite insistent, pressure fighting towards the second half of the fight. I'm not sure how much chance I give him against Teofimo Lopez if Teo stays at 135 pounds. But if he vacates and Kambosos has to fight someone else for the vacant belt, he's got a very good chance of becoming a world champion. As for Selby, if he can make super featherweight, because he skipped that division when he moved up from his world title reign at feather when that ended to lightweight, if he can make super feather, it might be worth trying a run there. He's obviously in the autumn of his career. Gave a good effort against Kambosos, but just didn't have enough to stay with him down the stretch. So it'd be interesting to see if he could, gain some of those previous physical advantages down at super feather, because he's certainly not the biggest lightweight. I mean, he looked pretty big on the night, to be fair, but history shows he may be more comfortable down at 130 if he can make it. Savannah Marshall, unquestionably the performance of the night on that show. Took Hannah Rankin apart, it's fair to say, and Hannah Rankin was the best and most experienced professional opponent that she'd met so far. A lot of people were doubting whether she could handle being dragged into deep waters. Well, we never really got to find out because, all due respect to Rankin, she didn't manage to place her in those deep waters. She was dogged. She tried a bit of everything. There was nothing more Hannah Rankin could have done within her own skill set and capabilities. She came forward. She rolled her way in. It's not like she was reckless defensively, but she still got caught with sharp, hard, accurate shots from Marshall, who just looked incredibly poised and composed from the off. That was perhaps the most impressive thing about her performance, in that this was her first world title fight. It was her first fight against anyone of note, really, and she didn't look at all fazed by it. She boxed really well, picked off, had that kind of languid style that's been honed alongside or under Peter Fury. Just looked really good, picked her punches well, and when the opportunity presented itself to end the fight, she took it ruthlessly. And the obvious fight to make now is between her and the Clarissa Shields. Savannah Marshall, obviously the only person to have ever beaten Clarissa Shields back in the amateurs, 2012 or 2011. I'd have to double check. But either way, a lot of people have accused Marshall of living off that win since then. Well, now she's got a world title valid at middleweight. Clarissa Shields got the other 3 major belts in the same weight. They've got the amateur backstory as well. They both indicated immediately after the fight on social media that they fancied a rematch in the pros. I'd love to see it. maybe Marshall could do with a couple more world level fights, as that was her first one, to kind of bed in at world level before she takes on the person many people consider the pound for pound best female fighter in the world. But if now's the time to make it, and that's where the money is and so on, let them go for it. You know, the depth of quality in the ladies' game while growing isn't there yet to suggest that they wouldn't be able to fight more than once anyway. You know, this could be a case of they fight, and if Marshall proves that she could have done with a bit more pro experience under her belt, and that shows in the performance, I'm sure they can fight again down the road. But now may be the time to make it. So fingers crossed. But yeah, they were the major fights. Oh, also delighted for Tommy McCarthy, who secured the vacant European Cruiserweight title. It wasn't a great fight to watch against Bilal Lagoon from Belgium, but he did seem to win fairly clearly, picked the better shots throughout. Struggled a little bit at times with Lagoon's pressure, and he certainly knew at the end that he'd been in a fight. But the cleaner, better, more technical work seemed to come from McCarthy for the most part. And he talks about fighting Maris Breedis afterwards, the WBSS champion. That seems a little ambitious for me. You know, Tommy McCarthy, good fighter though he is, technical, great amateur. He was stopped by Richard Riakporhe at kind of top domestic level not that long ago. And that's not a knock on him. Riakporhe's a really good fighter, but we're not saying Riakporhe's ready for Breedis, so I'm not sure he is either. You know, someone like Lawrence Okoli, if he wins the vacant WBO belt against Krzysztof Glowacki, he may then look to unify against Breedis, and what would be a massive fight. For McCarthy, I think he could do with a couple of defences at European level, whether against British fighters or continental Europe, just to get a bit more experience under his belt before making that step. And at the moment, it would be a leap to someone like Maris Breedis. But absolutely delighted for him. He's such a good guy. He's worked really hard for this. He's had an up and down career. And he becomes the first black Irishman to win a European title. And the next step for him, he would like to become the first black Irishman to win a world title. And someone on Twitter said to me, why are you mentioning his race? Why is that important? It's just because McCarthy mentioned it when I interviewed him and said it's one of his ambitions. It's not because I care particularly about things like that, but if it means a lot to him, I'd like to see him achieve it. So that's my kind of roundup of the weekend, if you like, minus Usyk Chisora, which is on my fight review, which you can see online on the channel. Let me know what you thought. What was the best performance of the weekend and what was the best fight of the weekend? Let me know those two questions, please. I will be back on Thursday for FLEXpectations, looking ahead to next weekend's actions at 4:30. And then I'll be back for the next ReFLEXions the following Monday, so a week from today, 4:30 PM once again. Really appreciate your time, as always, and I will see you all soon. Cheers.